Yay! I'm so excited today. I want to share on a topic that's been really alive for me lately, and this is around gender and how we look at and view gender in our society and perhaps a new perspective on gender. And that is starting with an acknowledgement that often what we see, this is a drawing of a standard light switch, right? That light switch, that familiar on-off click of we're either in one box of, say, female, or we're in another box, say, male, and that there's only two boxes, and we must sort of force fit into one of those two to fit into the current generally accepted gender model in this society. I want to invite throwing that model out the window. And instead, what's it like to explore a new possibility in what exploring in our gender means? And my love and I have been sitting with this and exploring it for a little bit, and then bringing it into some classes and some discussions with others in my work, and really starting to feel this potency of a new possibility of the way to look at gender. And I love that there are many others that are doing similar work in like, well, let's look, there may be another way to label genders. There are more than two, there are, say, 7. There are lots of ways to look at this possibility. And what really was driving me was I really feel like there isn't any single number, and that instead a new model it was needed. And my love came up with this great idea, and this gets back to this geeky side of myself and him that were, in my engineering background, this science techie geeky side. We're like, wait a minute, do you remember the days of the graphic equalizer? And everybody had one with your tape deck and your receiver and everything in the stereo system. And the graphic equalizer has this really cool quality of saying, hey, there are multiple variables that slide. There's a range of possibility with each of those variables. So I have a new model to propose for our gender model. And these are these slider bars. Okay, so like the old days of the graphic equalizer, here my model shows some ranges of possibility in a few variables that I want to invite. So for that, the first variable that is kind of the most obvious in the discussion of gender, perhaps, is our physical body. So we might say we have these 3 gender bars, and this first bar is physical. How do we identify, what do we notice in our physical body? And in the physical body, we often again think, oh, well, we only have 2, this light switch of either being female or male. And I want to invite, no. Actually, from embryologically speaking, our developmental tissue, we are emerging from the same place. We just start to have these, what are known as the homologs of the female and male genitalia, like that there are the equivalency, that our ovaries descend to become testicles, or vice versa, that the clitoris extends and expands to become the penis, or vice versa. But that in that spectrum of physical body, who's to say there's only one end of either end of the spectrum? There's a whole range. So we might identify that, hey, I'm either female-bodied or male-bodied or somewhere in between. And it depends. There are people who have both sets of genitalia or some rainbow spectrum in between. So I invite that there's a slider bar for our physical body and how we identify in gender. The second one is what I'll call energetic body, or how I identify in my energy. And what I mean there is actually another vast topic of conversation, because we could acknowledge that we have many energy bodies. And that gets into, again, a vast topic. So let's just kind of, for simplicity, take that down into one and say, well, I have this physical body that I'm delighting in, but I'm this vast energetic being. So in my energy, how do I feel? Am I energetically expressing, or do I connect with this essence of my masculine energy or my feminine energy? And again, there's not just one or the other. We all have both. Where do we feel most aligned in our energy bodies? So again, I might have this slider that says, I might feel primarily aligned with my masculine energy. I might feel primarily aligned with my feminine energy. Or I might find that actually I'm somewhere in between on this slider scale. Then the third piece is what I invite, and this gets into, these first two are kind of the primary pieces in this model. This third piece kind of goes into, now, as I sit with these first two, how do I identify, like what's my preference in terms of what another bodied being is that I'm interested in my sexual preference. So I'll say sexual preference of other bodies, other bodied beings. And again, I might have an attraction to or a resonance with primarily, let's get that into our view, there we go, primarily male-bodied beings or how they identify energetically. So this is actually a whole spectrum on its own, but for simplicity. Or I might identify primarily with female-bodied beings or how that might express in the energetics of who I'm attracted to. So as an example, with all these three, I want to give just a little bit about me and my story. And had you asked me, say, I don't know, several decades ago, I probably, in that headspace, in that mindset, I didn't really know much else, so I knew my buckets, and my bucket said, well, hey, I'm in a female body. Like, great. Okay, and then at the time, I would have said, I'm primarily attracted to men. Or, I mean, I'm primarily feeling, I'm sorry, that's the third one. In my energy body, I would have said, well, I'm kind of, like, I feel a little of both, but I was probably stronger in my masculine energy in that time. So I might have my slider bar be, maybe not completely into the masculine, but, up in that range. And then the third one is I was primarily, I thought I was heterosexual. Hey, I'm heterosexual. That must mean I'm attracted to men, and that seems to fit. So there we go. Now, as things progressed, and so this is an important piece of this model that I want to invite, is it changes. I've really acknowledged, and at first that was hard for me to acknowledge. I started to acknowledge it ain't necessarily these individual buckets. And oh, by the way, now I'm noticing in my embodied presence, in my physical body, I find a bit of a strength and a power in my genitalia, like the clitoris has this presence that's maybe even approaching more in the lingam quality. So perhaps as a female-bodied being, I might even tweak it a little bit up towards the masculine to say, my physical body feels in a range there. Now, my energetics, I totally identify right now as being 50-50. I feel very balanced and like centered in expressing fully into the masculine, fully into the feminine, but I consider myself very androgynous in that sort of sacred androgynous kind of way. So that's really feels good to me right now. So somewhere in the middle. And then in terms of my sexual preferences and how I identify, I feel primarily, I'm again right about in the middle. I often primarily connect with men, and yet I also have this beautiful attraction and love sharing and opening my heart in the way that I call omnisexuality, which is the specific body isn't as important, the specific physical or quality, it's am I consciously connecting, am I letting myself open to love, whether that be with a male-bodied being, a female-bodied being, somewhere in between, or nature, a tree, the sun, the sky. So it's just this really sweet new way of going, oh, you mean I don't have to fit into some box and say I only can be in here and nowhere else? Then instead we go, what's it like to enjoy this range of possibility through the expression of who we are? And as we sit with this, there's one other factor that comes in. It's like, how do we present? What does that, where do we feel safe to be who we are authentically in different environments? And it may look different at home and at work and socially and in our romantic partnerships. And that's a topic that's deep and rich on its own, and I would love to address in another time some thoughts on that. But that this is really about, for me, a feeling into what am I noticing for myself and my authenticity, and just kind of sitting with like this new possibility that maybe there's another way of allowing myself to be authentically who I am. And with that, I delight you and invite you to sit with this, see what you think, and I welcome feedback and thoughts.